Peter slept on. The light guttered and went out, leaving the tenement in darkness. But still, he slept. It must not have been less than 10 o'clock by the crocodile when he suddenly sat up in bed, wakened by he knew not what. It was a soft, cautious tapping on the door of his tree. Soft and cautious, but in that stillness, it was sinister. Peter felt for his dagger, and his hand gripped it. Then he spoke. This isn't real. Who is that? For long there was no answer. Then again, the knock. Who are you? No answer. He was thrilled, and he loved being thrilled. In 2 strides he reached the door. Unlike Slightly's door, it filled the aperture so that he could not see beyond it, nor could the one knocking see him. I won't open it unless you speak, Peter cried. And then at last the visitor spoke in a lovely bell-like voice. Let me in, Peter. It was Tink. And quickly he unbarred to her. She flew in excitedly, her face flushed and her dress stained with mud. What is it? Oh, you can never guess, she cried, and offered him 3 guesses. Out with it, he shouted. And in one ungrammatical sentence, as long as the ribbons conjurers pull from their mouths, she told of the capture of Wendy and the boys. Peter's heart bobbed up and down as he listened. Wendy bound, and on the pirate ship. She who loved everything to be just so. I'll rescue her, he cried, leaping at his weapons. As he leapt, he thought of something he could do to please her. He could take his medicine. His hand closed on the fatal drop. No! Shrieked Tinker Bell, who had heard Hook's muttering about his deed as he sped through the forest. Why not? It's poisoned. Poisoned? Who could have poisoned it? Hook. Don't be silly. How could Hook have gotten down here? Alas, Tinker Bell could not explain this, for even she did not know the dark secret of Slightly's tree. Nevertheless, Hook's words left no room for doubt. The cup was poisoned. Besides, said Peter, quite believing himself, I never fall asleep. He raised the cup. No time for words now. Time for deeds, and with one of her lightning movements, Tink got between his lips and the draught and drained it to the dregs. But Tink, how dare you drink my medicine? But she did not answer. Already she was reeling in the air. What's the matter with you? Cried Peter, suddenly afraid. It is poisoned, Peter, she told him softly, and now I'm going to be dead. Tink! Did you drink it to save me? Yes. But why, Tink? Her wings would scarcely carry her now, but in a reply she alighted on his shoulder and gave his nose a loving bite. She whispered in his ear, You silly fool, and then, tottering off to her chamber, lay down on the bed. So why did she do it? 'Cause she loves him. His head almost filled the 4th wall of her little room as he knelt near her in distress. Every moment her light was growing fainter, and he knew that if it went out, she would be no more. She liked his tears so much that she put out her beautiful finger and let them run over it. Her voice was so low that at first he could not make out what she said. Then he made it out. She was saying that she thought she could get well again if children believed in fairies. Peter flung out his arms. There were no children there, and it was night time, but he addressed all who might be dreaming of the Neverland, who were therefore nearer to him than you think. Boys and girls and papooses in their baskets hung from the trees. "Do you believe?" he cried. Tink sat up in bed almost briskly to listen to her fate. She fancied she heard answers in the affirmative, and then again she wasn't sure. "What do you think?" she asked Peter. "If you believe," he shouted to them, "clap your hands! Don't let Tink die!" Many clapped. Some didn't. A few beasts hissed, meaning like mean kids, not like animal beasts. The clapping stopped suddenly, as if countless mothers had rushed to their nurseries to see what was happening. But Tink was already saved. First her voice grew strong, then she popped out of bed. Then she was flashing through the room more merry and impudent as ever. She never thought of thanking those who believed. She would have liked to get at the ones who hissed. "And now to rescue Wendy!" The moon was riding in a cloudy heaven when Peter rose from his tree, begirt with weapons, to set out upon his perilous quest. It was not such a night as he would have chosen. He had hoped to fly, keeping not far from the ground, so that nothing unwanted should escape his eyes. But in that fitful light to have flown low would have meant trailing his shadow through the trees, thus disturbing the birds and acquainting a watchful foe that he was astir. He regretted now that he had given the birds of the island such strange names that they were very wild and difficult of approach. There was no other course but to press forward in native fashion, at which, happily, he was adept. But in what direction? For he could not be sure that the children had been taken to the ship. A slight fall of snow had obliterated all the footmarks, and a deathly silence pervaded the island, as if for a space nature still stood in horror of the recent carnage. He had taught the children something of the forest lore that he himself had learned from Tiger Lily and Tinker Bell, and knew that in their dire hour they were not likely to forget it. Slightly, if he had had an opportunity, would blaze the trees. For instance, Curly would drop seeds, and Wendy would leave her handkerchief at some important place. But morning was needed to search for such guidance, and he could not wait. The upper world called him, but would give no help. The crocodile passed him, but not another living thing, not a sound, not a movement, and yet he knew well that sudden death might be at the next tree, or stalking him from behind. He swore this terrible oath. "Hook this time, or me!" Now he crawled forward like a snake, and again erect, he darted across the space on which the moonlight played, one finger on his lip, his dagger at the ready. He was frightfully happy. It's all this fear and terror, and he's like thrilled at the whole chase of it all. Here's a picture of him sneaking through. What's back there? Pirate ship. Dun dun dun. To see what happens tomorrow. Bye, guys.